Deep within forgotten valleys, shrouded by ancient whispers and persistent fog, lies the Blackwood Mine. For over a century, its gaping maw has been a testament to human ambition, then to inexplicable abandonment. Locals speak of it with chilling reverence, a place where the earth itself breathes a cold, unsettling sigh. They tell tales of strange disappearances, machinery ceasing without cause, and a darkness clinging to the rock. It's a place that beckons the curious, yet warns the wise. But, for a select few, the allure of the unknown, the promise of discovery, proved too strong. Our story begins with a descent into this silent, foreboding abyss, where reality and myth blur. Our initial team, comprised of seasoned geologists, a parapsychologist with healthy skepticism, and an experienced caver, entered Blackwood with a clear mandate: to scientifically evaluate its anomalies. Equipped with cutting-edge sensors and thermal imagers, they were prepared for geological curiosities, perhaps residual mining hazards, but not for what awaited them. The air grew heavy with palpable stillness as they ventured deeper, the mine's oppressive silence broken only by their boots and faint equipment hum. An initial thrill of pioneering into the forgotten was quickly tempered by apprehension, a feeling they were not merely observing, but were themselves being observed. It didn't take long for the first signs to emerge. Deep within a forgotten shaft, far from any known power source, the team's electromagnetic field detectors began to spike erratically. Readings soared, then plummeted, exhibiting patterns that defied natural explanation. It wasn't static, it was dynamic, as if an unseen current pulsed through the rock. Geologists scrambled to recalibrate, cross-referencing, but the data remained stubbornly consistent. An unknown energy signature, powerful and localized, yet without discernible origin. This wasn't a malfunction, it was an anomaly, instantly shattering their preconceived notions of the abandoned mine. Then came the organic discovery. Adhering to the damp, cold walls of a cavern previously thought barren, they found it. A pulsating, bioluminescent growth, unlike anything catalogued in known biology. It wasn't moss, nor fungus, nor any deep earth extremophile. Its texture was gelatinous yet firm, emitting a faint rhythmic glow that seemed to breathe. Samples were meticulously collected, but even under powerful microscopes, its cellular structure revealed no terrestrial analog. It was, in essence, an organism without a taxonomic home, a biological impossibility thriving in the darkness, hinting at processes beyond our current understanding. As these inexplicable findings mounted, a subtle shift permeated the team's morale. Initial excitement of discovery slowly gave way to pervasive disquiet. The mine's oppressive silence, once merely atmospheric, now felt watchful, almost predatory. Equipment glitches became more frequent, not just energy spikes but subtle malfunctions coinciding with moments of intense focus. Shadows seemed to deepen unnaturally, and the cold, damp air occasionally carried faint, almost imperceptible whispers. Too fleeting to confirm, yet too distinct to ignore. A profound, unsettling realization settled in. They were not alone. Blackwood Mine was far more than an abandoned hole. It was a living, breathing enigma. Pushing past the initial anomalies, the team ventured deeper into Blackwood's forgotten arteries. The air grew thick, heavy with an oppressive silence broken only by the crunch of their boots and the faint hum of their dwindling equipment. It wasn't long before the familiar rough-hewn tunnels gave way to something else entirely. Smooth, almost polished surfaces began to appear, defying the crude pickaxe marks of human miners. These weren't natural rock formations. They were too precise, too deliberate, hinting at an architecture far beyond anything known to exist in the dark heart of the mountain. A chilling realization began to dawn. Adorning these alien walls were intricate patterns, etched with a precision that spoke of immense time and an unknown purpose. They weren't hieroglyphs or pictograms, but a language of geometry and light, pulsing faintly with an internal luminescence that seemed to react to their presence. Dr. Aris, a seasoned archaeologist, confirmed their antiquity. These markings predated any official record of mining in the region, perhaps even human civilization itself. The team exchanged uneasy glances, their scientific curiosity now tinged with a profound sense of historical anachronism. Who had carved these symbols, and what forgotten saga did they tell? As they pressed on, the subtle energy fluctuations detected earlier surged into a dissonant symphony. Portable lights flickered erratically, casting monstrous shadows that danced with their own will. Communication devices crackled with static, voices dissolving into an incoherent babble. Sensors, calibrated for geological mapping, began spitting out nonsensical data, their screens a chaotic storm of numbers and symbols. The once reliable technology, their lifeline to the surface and their understanding of this alien environment, was failing, systematically, as if being actively resisted by an unseen force within the very rock around them. Isolation became less a fear and more a tangible reality. The physical toll was immediate and undeniable. Headaches, sharp and persistent, plagued the team. Disorientation set in, the familiar cardinal directions rendered meaningless in the oppressive darkness. Paranoia, a silent predator, began to stalk their thoughts. Each creak of the mine, each distant echo, magnified into a potential threat. Dr. Lena Petrova, the team's psychologist, observed a marked increase in anxiety and irritability, the professional facade of her colleagues slowly eroding under the relentless pressure. The mine wasn't just a place of discovery, it was becoming a crucible, testing the very limits of their sanity and resilience. Then came the sounds, not the natural groans of a living mountain, nor the echoes of their own movements, but something else entirely. Faint, rhythmic pulses seemed to emanate from the very air, a low thrumming that resonated in their bones, accompanied by fleeting, almost melodic whispers that defied linguistic recognition. One moment, a sensor would spike with an impossible pattern. The next, a light would dim in, perfect synchronicity with an imagined beat. This was no longer just an anomaly. It was a response, a communication. The chilling realization settled upon them. They were not merely exploring an ancient structure. They were being observed, perhaps even addressed by an intelligence that had patiently waited in the deep, silent darkness, now stirring from its slumber. The escalating energy anomalies, once confined to flickering readouts and intermittent static, now manifested with unnerving physicality. A low resonant hum began to permeate the very rock around them, too deep and consistent to be geological, vibrating not just in their ears but in their bones. It was a pulse, slow and deliberate, a heartbeat emanating from the earth itself. Tools subtly shifted on their trays, nudging inches from original placement, only to be noticed in peripheral vision, creating constant, unsettling distractions. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken tension, a palpable pressure pressing down on their chests, making each breath a conscious effort. The subtle unease had curdled into pervasive dread, a cold tendril coiling around their collective psyche. This wasn't just the mind playing tricks. It felt deliberate, almost predatory. Every shadow seemed to hold a fleeting form. Every echo carried a whisper that wasn't there a moment before. Dr. Aris, usually the picture of stoic logic, found himself constantly glancing over his shoulder, a primal instinct overriding years of scientific training. He described it as an intrusive awareness, a sensation of being scrutinized from every angle, not by cameras or infrared sensors, but by something ancient and profoundly alien that understood their presence, their intentions, and even their fears. The team huddled closer, their usual banter replaced by strained silence, each member lost in their own growing terror. One evening, while setting up a new seismic sensor deeper in a newly discovered chamber, the hum intensified, dramatically, morphing into a guttural growl that reverberated through the rock face. It wasn't an animal sound, nor geological plates. It was immense, ancient power, laced with something that felt like raw, unfettered anger. Then, a series of rapid rhythmic impacts began, striking the cavern walls around them, precisely spaced, as if a colossal invisible fist was pounding a warning. Dust rained down in sheets, equipment screens flickered wildly, and the air crackled with a static charge that made their hair stand on end. This was no anomaly. This was a direct, undeniable communication, a territorial roar from something that resented their intrusion. It was shortly after this auditory assault that Dr. Aris experienced his most profound and terrifying break from reality. Alone for a moment, calibrating a spectral analyzer, the chamber around him seemed to twist and distort. The rough-hewn rock walls melted away, replaced by a pulsating organic membrane, veined with sickly green light. From its depths, a multitude of eyes, primordial and insectoid, slowly opened, fixed on him. A wave of suffocating despair washed over him, a sense of utter insignificance in the face of an intelligence so vast and ancient it defied comprehension. He felt tendrils cold and unseen brush against his mind, whispering truths that shattered his understanding of existence, leaving him gasping for air, trembling, and utterly disoriented. When his team found him, he was curled into a fetal position, muttering incoherently about the void and the seeing. While they tried to rationalize it as extreme stress or localized magnetic field effects, Aris knew with absolute certainty that what he had witnessed was real, a direct intrusion. The entity wasn't just aware. It was actively engaging, probing their minds, asserting its dominance. The game had changed. They were no longer explorers. They were trespassers in a domain far older, more powerful, and undeniably hostile. The pulse, under the earth, was not just a sound. It was a heartbeat, and it was beating for them. The chilling certainty that they were not alone, that an intelligence actively observed and manipulated their perceptions, gnawed at the team's resolve. The recent hallucination, so vivid and terrifying, had shattered any lingering doubts about the malevolent presence lurking in the depths. Every shadow seemed to hold a watching eye, every whisper of air a silent judgment. Equipment continued its erratic dance, offering false readings and frustrating their attempts at objective analysis. The subjective terror was undeniably real, demanding they understand what this was, not just where it was, if they had any hope of surviving its insidious influence. The unseen dangers warping the mind now required a deeper investigation. Driven by this desperate need for context, the team shifted focus from pure exploration to historical investigation. Accessing old local archives, dusty municipal records, and forgotten community journals, they began to piece together a narrative far older than the mine's official charter. It quickly became apparent that the land itself, long before the first pickaxe struck rock, was shrouded in a persistent aura of dread. Whispers of a cursed place or forbidden grounds were common in the earliest documents, often dismissed as superstition. Yet the sheer volume and consistency of these obscure references painted a disturbing picture of inexplicable occurrences. What they unearthed was a mosaic of local folklore, chillingly specific to the very gorge where the mine now lay. Tales of livestock vanishing without a trace, of hunters lost in the dense woods never to return, and even entire families abandoning homesteads overnight, citing unnatural shadows and sounds from below the earth, pervaded the oldest accounts. These weren't isolated incidents, but a recurring theme across centuries, often coinciding with unusual seismic activity or peculiar atmospheric phenomena. Disturbingly, some records alluded to strange gatherings, clandestine rituals performed by indigenous tribes and early settlers, desperate attempts to appease or ward off an unseen force. The details of these ancient rituals were fragmented but haunting. Crude drawings depicted figures bowing before a darkened chasm, offering symbols of protection or sacrifice. Local shamans and wise women, long forgotten, had left behind cryptic warnings etched into stone or woven into tapestries. They spoke of a sleeper beneath the earth, a primal force that, if disturbed, would unleash an ancient terror. Do not wake what dreams below, One fragmented text read, "For its slumber is our peace, and its awakening, our eternal nightmare." These were urgent admonitions against disturbing a profound, malevolent presence. The realization struck them with the force of a physical blow. Their current ordeal was not an isolated incident, a mere mining accident, but the latest chapter in a millennia-old saga. The entity they now faced, twisting their minds and manipulating reality, was the very same thing that sleeps below from ancient legends. The abandoned mine wasn't just a physical shell, it was a wound, a breach in a forgotten barrier, allowing something truly primeval to stir. The folklore wasn't just history, it was a terrifying, meticulously documented warning, a desperate guide to the horror they had unleashed. The past wasn't merely echoing, it was actively grasping at their present. The legends and the madness could no longer be dismissed. The corporation, facing an asset of unimaginable value, activated Project Chimera. Within 72 hours, the remote mining site was transformed. Unmarked helicopters delivered a new kind of team. These weren't miners. They were ghosts from academia and clandestine research. A quantum physicist who had vanished from public life, a xenobotanist from a black-budget project, and a geolinguist, specializing in pre-human communication. They were assembled not to exploit the mine, but to understand the architect who built the impossible within it. Their initial findings only deepened the mystery. The energy signatures pulsed with a rhythm that wasn't random, yet followed no decipherable sequence. It was like a heartbeat that was also a prime number. The biological samples were more confounding. They found cellular structures containing silicon, yet behaving with the plasticity of carbon. They were alive, but didn't metabolize or reproduce, they simply resonated. Dr. Eris Thorne, the lead biologist, described it as a living circuit board, designed by an intelligence that perceives information as a nutrient. The mine itself was an organism. This paradox shattered the team's unity. The briefing room became a battleground of theories. Dr. Thorne argued they were witnessing a new kingdom of life, a litho-organism that had slumbered for eons. He demanded it be studied under strict protocols, treated as a first contact. Opposing him was Dr. Lena Petrova, the physicist, who saw not life, but a wound in space-time. She argued the signatures were echoes of another universe bleeding into ours, and the samples were merely exotic matter crystallizing at the contact point. Probing it further, she warned, was like poking a hole in a dam. The debate quickly spiraled from scientific to ethical. If Thorne was right, were they vivisecting a creature the size of a mountain? The team's bioethicist Elias Vance framed the dilemma in stark terms. He asked, "Are we astronomers discovering a star or a virus entering a host? Our perspective determines our actions, and our actions may determine everything." The question hung in the air. The corporation wanted a path to monetization, but the team faced a moral responsibility that dwarfed any contract. They were no longer scientists. They were gatekeepers, unsure if they were keeping something out or keeping something in. Ultimately, a directive from their employers broke the stalemate. The order, establish communication. Petrova was horrified, calling it cosmic recklessness. Thorne was cautiously optimistic, seeing a chance to learn. A compromise was reached. They wouldn't drill. Instead, they would use the entity's own language. They would replicate the core frequency of the energy pulse and broadcast it back into the heart of the mine. A single, focused signal. It was a knock on a door, sealed for millions of years. A question posed to the silent architect. As they calibrated the emitters, a profound silence fell over the site, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The scientific debates, once academic, now felt like whispers before a storm. Dr. Eris Thorne, xenobiologist, meticulously mapped energy fluctuations, noting a disturbing resonance mimicking distorted biological frequencies. Dr. Lena Petrova, quantum physicist, theorized localized space-time distortions, suggesting the thing created its own reality pocket. Instruments screamed in protest, readings spiking erratically. A palpable dread permeated the bedrock. Every sensor on high alert, every camera scrutinized, as the team braced for theory to collide with terrifying reality. That collision arrived with a chilling, silent force. Not an explosion, but a profound absence of light, a localized void swallowing the cavern's dim illumination. From its heart, tendrils of solidified shadow unfurled, propagating like a cancerous growth across ancient rock. They pulsed with sickening luminescence, sickly green and violet, defying the spectrum. Where they touched, rock warped, melted without heat, leaving glassy, obsidian-like scars shimmering with unnatural energy. It was a partial unveiling, a mere shadow, yet enough to shatter the scientists' illusion of control. The team's composure fractured instantly. Detached observation gave way to primal fear. Dr. Thorne, usually stoic, stumbled back, eyes wide, with horror. Petrova, the rationalist, found her hands shaking, breath catching. The entity had offered a glimpse, not of itself, but of its capacity to fundamentally alter existence. A declaration of power, a stark reminder of insignificance. If you're finding this descent into the unknown captivating, please like this video and share your theories in the comments below. What do you think they're facing? The manifestation was brief, agonizing seconds, but its impact indelible. Shadow. Tendrils receded abruptly, leaving only glassy scars and a lingering metallic tang. Yet in that fleeting moment, something profound occurred. One remote probe, closest, captured a fragmented image, a brief, distorted snapshot. It wasn't a creature, but a swirling vortex of impossible geometry, a fractal nightmare defying three-dimensional space. Shapes within shapes, constantly shifting, hinting at an architecture designed by a mind utterly alien, utterly hostile. This wasn't merely a life form. It was an existential threat, bending reality to its will. Data collected was sparse, fragmented, yet painted a picture far more terrifying than any beast. It suggested an intelligence or instinct capable of manipulating the universe's fundamental building blocks. The mission pivoted from discovery to desperate containment, and now, to an urgent, frantic quest for understanding. What they had glimpsed was an abyss, not just of space or time, but of knowledge itself. Scientists, once seekers of truth, now stared into a void threatening to consume their understanding and sanity. The true horror had only just begun to unfurl. The unsettling manifestations witnessed previously were merely a prelude. What followed was an abrupt, terrifying escalation. The entity, no longer content with mere glimpses or energy fluctuations, began to assert itself with chilling, undeniable aggression. Subterranean tremors intensified, not randomly, but in patterns that seemed deliberate, targeting structural weaknesses. Equipment designed to monitor its presence now malfunctioned violently, shorting out systems or, more disturbingly, reconfiguring itself to emit frequencies that caused unbearable auditory distress. The air itself grew heavy, thick with an unseen pressure that choked the breath. This was no longer passive observation, it was a declaration of war. Desperate to regain control, the scientific team initiated containment protocols, deploying advanced energy shields and reinforced barriers. Yet each attempt was met with bewildering defiance. Walls of hardened alloys would buckle and warp as if subjected to immense localized gravitational forces. Energy fields, meant to isolate, would flicker and collapse, not due to power failure but seemingly pushed back by an invisible intelligent force. Specialized drones sent to survey deeper caverns returned as mangled husks, or simply vanished, their signals terminating abruptly with a final garbled shriek. The entity wasn't just powerful. It was learning, adapting, actively dismantling every human safeguard. In a final, desperate bid for understanding, a bold attempt at communication was made. Utilizing complex algorithmic patterns and resonant frequencies, the team tried to establish a dialogue. The response was immediate and devastating. Instead of data, they received a torrent of raw, unfiltered terror directly into their neural interfaces. images of cosmic voids, existential dread, and the crushing insignificance of human life. Several researchers collapsed, racked by seizures and night terrors, their minds irrevocably scarred by the sheer malevolence projected. It wasn't communication. It was an assault, a psychic scream designed to obliterate hope and reason, proving a conscious hostile intelligence. The very architecture of the mind began to morph, twisting into a cruel extension of the entity's will. Tunnels meticulously mapped would suddenly seal themselves with impossibly dense rock formations trapping exploration teams. Other passages previously impassable would mysteriously open, luring the unwary deeper into its grasp, only to collapse behind them. The air pressure became erratic, oxygen levels fluctuating wildly, and strange, bioluminescent growths pulsed on cavern walls, mimicking human voices in distorted whispers, driving men to paranoia. The mine was no longer a geological feature. It was a living, breathing labyrinth designed to disorient, terrorize, and ultimately consume any who dared to trespass. The chilling realization dawned upon everyone. They were not dealing with an inert specimen, nor a mere biological anomaly, but an ancient, malevolent consciousness that considered their presence an intolerable intrusion. Its capabilities, once theorized, were now manifesting with terrifying clarity. Control over matter, manipulation of perception, and an intelligence that far outstripped human comprehension. The initial terror of the unknown had evolved into a profound existential dread. This was an entity that didn't just exist. It actively sought to dominate, to eradicate, transforming the subterranean world into its personal hunting ground. The project had shifted from discovery to desperate survival, trapped within the awakening horror. The tremors that had rattled the mine's ancient bones now escalated into a violent, earth-shattering convulsion. Alarms shrieked, a cacophony of digital warnings drowned out by the groaning of stressed metal and fracturing rock. The entity, no longer content with mere manipulation, tore through its containment field with a force that defied physics, a guttural roar echoing from the very bedrock. It wasn't a physical roar, but an assault on the senses, a psychic scream that vibrated through their skulls, disorienting and paralyzing. Dust billowed, obscuring vision, but the sheer kinetic energy of its liberation was undeniable, throwing personnel against walls, twisting reinforced steel, like wet paper. This was not an awakening, it was a declaration of war. Chaos erupted. Lights flickered, then died, plunging sections of the labyrinthine tunnels into absolute darkness, save for the emergency strobes that painted grotesque shadows across the collapsing infrastructure. Dr. Eris's voice, usually calm and measured, was now a strained shout through the comms. "Evacuate. Everyone. Immediate evacuation. Get to the primary shaft." But the primary shaft was miles away, through a network, now actively fighting against them. Rockfalls became landslides, sealing off escape routes, trapping the less fortunate. The air grew thick with pulverized stone and the acrid stench of ozone, the residual energy signature of whatever devastating power had just been unleashed. Their carefully planned retreat had become a desperate, every person for themselves scramble. The entity was no longer just a presence. It was a hunter. Its form, still partially obscured by the dust and the sheer scale of the destruction, seemed to shimmer, to distort the very air around it. They heard it before they saw it, a chilling, rhythmic scrape against the rock, impossibly fast, impossibly close. And then came the whispers, not auditory, but directly implanted into their minds, fragmented thoughts of ancient hunger, of cosmic indifference, of a profound alien malice that sought not just their destruction, but their assimilation. It could manipulate the environment with terrifying precision, not just causing collapses, but reshaping the rock, forming barriers, traps, turning the mine into a living, predatory organism. They moved as one, a terrified unit navigating the treacherous terrain, their flashlights cutting through the gloom, revealing glimpses of the horror behind them. It was a shifting, amorphous mass, tentacles of shadow and something far worse, something crystalline and sharp, reaching out, scraping, tearing. They saw one of their own, a geologist named Miller, caught in a sudden inexplicable rockfall. His screams were abruptly cut short, not by the impact but by something unseen that pulled him into the darkness, leaving only a widening pool of crimson on the jagged stones. The entity wasn't just collapsing the mine, it was using the mine, its very fabric, as a weapon, as an extension of its predatory will. Hope dwindled with every collapsing section, every lost colleague. The primary shaft felt like a mythical destination, a distant dream, in a nightmare. Erterate, Eris, despite her terror, was still barking orders, trying to guide them through the deepening chaos, her voice cracking with strain. The entity's pursuit was relentless, its presence a cold, suffocating blanket over their minds, its whispers growing louder, more insistent, promising oblivion. They were not merely escaping a collapsing mine. They were fleeing a sentient, malevolent force that had just found its freedom and seemed determined to ensure no witnesses survived its terrible awakening. The veil had indeed torn, and the abyss was now hunting them. After the chaos, a splinter group, battered but resolute, made a choice that defied all instinct. Instead of pressing outwards towards the fading light of the surface, they turned deeper, drawn by a desperate, almost suicidal impulse to understand. The entity's hunt still a fresh wound, yet a flicker of scientific curiosity, a burning need for answers, outweighed the primal urge to escape. They believed that only by confronting the source, by unraveling the nightmare's genesis, could any true resolution be found. This wasn't merely survival. It was a desperate gamble for humanity's future. Their path led them through tunnels long abandoned, beyond known geological surveys, into a realm where the very rock seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. The air grew heavy, thick with an acrid scent, oppressive silence broken only by unseen water and their frantic hearts. Equipment malfunctioned, compasses spun, wildly. Clear signs they neared a powerful, disruptive force. They followed a faint, almost subliminal resonance, a vibration in the earth that felt less like geology and more like a heartbeat, leading them deeper into the planet's scarred arteries, towards the anomaly's epicenter. And then, they found it. Not a creature, not a machine, but a nexus. A vast crystalline formation pulsating with a sickly green light, embedded deep within a cavern of impossible geometry. It wasn't just rock. It was an organ, a living conduit. Data streams, previously fragmented, coalesced into a horrifying tapestry. This wasn't an alien invasion. It was an ancient indigenous intelligence, a parasitic consciousness that had slumbered beneath the earth for eons, feeding on geological stresses and now, awakened, on life itself. It was the planet's dark, symbiotic horror. The entity was not merely confined to the mine. It was a vast, sprawling network of consciousness, its tendrils reaching through the Earth's crust, influencing seismic activity, subtly altering ecosystems. This crystalline nexus was its brain, its heart, its primary anchor to this dimension. It had been an unintentional guardian, maintaining a delicate balance by absorbing excess telluric energy. But humanity's disruption had not only awakened it, but corrupted its ancient purpose, transforming it into a ravenous predator. The choice was stark: destroy this nexus and risk planetary cataclysms, or allow it to consume all life. There was no escape from this impossible dilemma, no easy path forward. With grim resolve, one of them, perhaps the scientist who first theorized its existence, stepped forward. The plan was crude, desperate. Overload the nexus with their remaining power cells, destabilize its core frequency, hoping to sever its connection or force dormancy. The act would be suicidal, a final self-immolating spark in the suffocating darkness. As the others watched, helpless, a surge of energy erupted from the crystal, engulfing the sacrificer in a blinding, terrifying flash, sealing their fate and leaving the true consequences to unfold. The acrid smell of ozone and burnt rock still clung to their clothes, a phantom reminder of the inferno they had barely escaped. Only a handful emerged from the maw of that mountain, their faces etched with a horror that would never fade. They carried no physical trophies, no proof of the impossible, only the shattered fragments of their sanity and the chilling echo of a scream that wasn't human. The silence outside the mine felt heavier than any sound, a suffocating blanket over the unspeakable truths they now bore. Each breath was a struggle, each heartbeat a drum against the walls of a secret too vast, too terrifying to ever be shared. Swiftly, brutally, the cover-up began. Before the dust could truly settle, a contingent of black-suited figures descended, their faces impassive, their orders absolute. The mine entrance was systematically demolished, tons of earth and rock collapsing to form an impenetrable tomb. Official reports were meticulously crafted, detailing a tragic mining accident, a gas explosion, a geological anomaly, anything but the truth. The few survivors were debriefed, their accounts twisted, their memories selectively erased or dismissed as trauma-induced delusions. The world would never know what truly lurked beneath that mountain. But the human mind is a stubborn thing, and some truths refuse to be buried. For those who survived, sleep became a battlefield, haunted by the crimson glow, the tendrils of shadow, the alien intelligence that had peered into their souls. Paranoia became a constant companion, every creak of a floorboard, every distant rumble, a terrifying reminder of the entity they had left behind. They lived in a self-imposed exile, unable to connect with a world that remained blissfully ignorant, burdened by a knowledge that isolated them completely. The weight of the secret was a physical ache, threatening to break their already fractured minds. Yet even as the official narrative solidified, a persistent question gnawed at the edges of their fractured reality. Was it truly contained, or merely dormant? The earth itself seemed to whisper the answer, in the subtle shifts of the tectonic plates, the inexplicable seismic activity in the region, the occasional, faint hum that only they seemed to perceive. The ceiling of the mine felt less like a victory and more like a temporary reprieve, a fragile lid placed upon a simmering pot. The entity had tasted freedom, and the taste of such power rarely fades, and so the legacy of the silence endures. The mountain stands, a silent sentinel over a grave that is not empty. Below, in the suffocating darkness, something waits. It remembers the light, the intrusion, the brief, exhilarating taste of the surface world. It learns, it adapts, it bides its time. For the earth has a long memory, and ancient horrors stir slowly but inevitably. This was not an end, but merely an intermission. The next act is not a matter of if, but when. And when it awakens again, the world will not be so fortunate to have only a handful of witnesses. The terror will spread.